Hello, welcome to the second video on the Book 6 Unit 4 Vocabulary. In the previous video, we introduced the words, we practiced their pronunciation, we talked about the word form as presented on your vocabulary sheet, and we talked about the meaning of the words, and we used them in some practice sentences. In this video, we are going to look at the vocabulary in a bit more depth. It's a fairly basic video, so it shouldn't be too stressful for you to follow. Okay, so as always in the second video, we are going to remind ourselves of the pronunciation of the words from reading 1. So these are 12 words that we should all be familiar with at this stage. And here we are just going to go over the pronunciation. So number 1, achieve. Achieve. Number 2, acquire. Acquire. Number 3, apparently. Apparently. Number 4, approach. Approach. Number 5, behavior. Behavior. Number 6, category. Category. Number 7, cognition. Cognition. Number 8, controversy. Controversy. Number 9, obvious. Obvious. Number 10, perception. Perception. Number 11, unconscious. Unconscious. And number 12, unique. Unique. Okay, so as always, if you had issues saying any one of those words or at issue saying any one of those words, please repeat that portion of the video until you get used to saying them correctly. Remember, that is needed when it comes to your speaking. You need to be able to say the words correctly. So your marker or the person listening to you understands what you're saying. Okay, let's press ahead. So here we've got the verb acquire. So let's think about this word. What does it mean when we acquire something as a verb? What does it mean? Well, we can acquire a skill. What are we doing if we acquire a skill? We are probably learning that skill. So to acquire something is to develop or learn something, usually a skill. It's obtained or gained. An example of something acquire is a language. If we keep practicing it, we can maybe learn how to speak that language. Okay, so how would we put this verb in a sentence? Well, we would put this verb after our subject, for example. So we could say something like, students acquire a lot of study skills and English language knowledge during their time in the PYD. Why does that make sense? Because students develop a lot of study skills and English language knowledge. They basically learn it. And acquire is another way of saying developing or learning a skill. Study skills and English language knowledge are the skills that they acquire. Okay, let's look at this word, apparently. What does apparently mean? When we say apparently, we really kind of mean something seems to be true, or seemingly or allegedly. There are two synonyms for apparently, seemingly or allegedly. So apparently means seeming to be true. So you might put it in front of something like this statement. So apparently, not all Saudis are rich. Apparently, not all Saudis are rich. Notice here that apparently is an adverb, so it can work as at the start of the sentence as long as you put a comma before it. So you can say, apparently, not all Saudis are rich. So basically, what this means, it's seemingly true that not all Saudis are rich. This word is approach. Approach. However, notice here it's being presented as a noun. When we use approach as a verb, it means to move towards something. So if I'm using approach as a verb, I'm getting closer to something. So if the Earth, let's say, is approaching the sun, bad news for us, it means it's getting closer to the sun. Hopefully, it won't get so close that we'll um, burn up. But that's what approach means, to get closer to something. If we're using approach as a noun, it's got a different meaning. Remember, as a verb, it means to get closer to something. As a noun, it's got a different meaning. What is that meaning? It's the method or way of doing something. In other words, it's the procedure we use. How would we put that in a sentence? Well, we can use it as a noun here. And my sentence would be, the approach you take usually determines the success you have. In other words, the way you have of doing things usually determines the success you have. If the way you have of doing things is very carefree, you don't really care, then you will probably not be as successful. If your way of doing things is to put in a lot of hard work and aim for the best, then you probably will be successful. So your way of doing things or the procedure you use could determine your success. The next word is behavior. Behavior. And behavior is a noun. It's the way you act or conduct yourself. The way you act or conduct yourself. So it's basically the things you do are part of your behavior. How would we put this in a sentence? Well, Turkey's mom was angry with his bad behavior. What could bad behavior be? Well, if you're conducting yourself in a bad way, you might be very rude to people, you might be showing bad manners, and that might upset your parents, which would make sense why Turkey's mom was upset with his, or was angry with his bad behavior. What do you think good behavior would be? Well, being polite, showing manners, doing the things that people like you to do. That's showing good behavior. What do you think bad behavior as a student might be? Bad behavior as a student, probably making lots of noise during class, interrupting your teacher, taking out your mobile phone or when you're asked to put it away. These are all examples of bad behavior. So remember, behavior are things that or it's the way we conduct ourselves, the things that we do, the way that you act and conduct yourself. Okay, let's go to the next word. Here we have category. Category. Category is a noun. It basically means a group or selection based on similar qualities. So animals are a category. What would go in that category? Well, all animals, things like dogs, cats, horses. These are animals, so they would fall into the animal category. Then we can have foods. We can have, well, what's a food? What goes in the food category? Well, we could have fruit. Fruit's a food. We could have bread. Great. We could have vegetables. Could we have a table in the food category? No, you don't eat at a table. You eat maybe on a table, but you don't eat at a table. So it wouldn't go in the food category. Now, sometimes we can break categories down to be even smaller. So using my animal example, I could say, well, I don't want just animals, I want dogs. So the poodle goes in the dog category. The sheepdog goes in the dog category. Does the cat go in the dog category? No, it doesn't. And it's the same with food. We can have real food. This is the food over here. All examples of real healthy food that isn't processed, so isn't really made with stuff that isn't proper food. This is all processed food. This is all made from stuff which is partly not real food, so not the food we naturally eat. It's in all of this food over here. It's processed, so it doesn't really come from the same natural environment as this food over here. In fact, some of this bread has this white bread. A lot of it has like factory-made products in it. Not very good. Okay, so how would we put that in a sentence? Well, we could say, real food is so much better for you. You should avoid everything in the junk food category. The junk food category. What food goes in the junk food category? Well, anything that you think of as junk food goes in the junk food category. Do you think healthy food would go in the junk food category? Do you think an apple is junk food? No, an apple is not junk food. Do you think a burger is junk food? Yes, so a burger would go in the junk food category. Okay, the next word is cognition. Cognition. Cognition is a noun. Cognition is basically considered as what we use to think. What we use to think. It's got a technical meaning. I'm a psychologist, so cognition is very important to psychology. And in psychology, cognition basically means the mechanisms by which we acquire, process, store, and act on information from the environment. But what you really need to think of with cognition is it's how we think, how we think. So how would we use that? So how do we best describe cognition? How are we able to think? Can you understand this? So when we're using cognition, we're really thinking about the thinking part of our brains, similar enough to a mind. Similar enough to a mind. It's got a more technical definition, but you just think, all you need to do is think of it as kind of in the same way as a mind. And here is a famous quote related to cognition. I doubt, therefore I think therefore I am. A famous quote by René Descartes. Here we've got the word controversy. Controversy. Controversy is a noun. Try and think about what controversy means. Well, controversy is a serious disagreement or debate. So if something creates a serious disagreement or debate, it's what we call controversial. That's an adjective, and it causes controversy. Controversial things cause controversy. How would we use that in a sentence? Well, let's look at this gap fill. Let's see how this works. We have the idea of a woman driving in Saudi Arabia was very something at first. Is it still? So, what type of word do you think goes here? Would it be controversy or would it be controversial? The correct word here is controversial. The idea of a woman driving in Saudi Arabia was very controversial at first. It caused a lot of debate. It caused some disagreements. Some people didn't want it to happen. Some other people did want it to happen. And because it caused that debate, it was controversial. It caused a controversy. If everybody agrees that something is the right thing to do and there's no debate about it, do you think it would cause a controversy? No, it wouldn't. It's only things that really cause debate and that there are serious disagreements about. Let's move on. This word is obvious. Obvious. Obvious is an adjective. It means easy to notice or understand. A synonym for obvious is evident. Another synonym would be clear. So something that is clear is obvious. Something that is evident is obvious. What's an example of something obvious? Well, if we look at this little maths equation over here, this is obvious. 6 minus 3 equals 3. This is very clear. This is evident. This is very easy to understand. So it's obvious. And here we have the picture of the man demonstrating by covering these 3 chicks just to make it easier for the children to understand why this is the case. But for adults, this is very obvious. We don't need to think very much about this. So using this word obvious in a sentence, we could say the answer to 2 plus 2 should be obvious to you. Why? You're going to be a math teacher, right? Well, hopefully, even if you're not going to be a math teacher, the answer to 2 plus 2 should be obvious. It's not a hard mathematical formula or puzzle or arithmetic. Okay, let's move on. Okay, this word is perception. Perception. So what do we think about when we think about perception? Well, we think about the senses. We think about awareness. We think about observation. So what do we mean by the senses? Well, we mean sight, being able to see, hearing, listening, being able to use our ears, a sense of smell. That's perception, what we smell. Being able to taste things. That's also a sense. And another sense would be able to touch things or feel things. That's another sense. So perception is related to these senses. It's how we use our senses or having an awareness or observation. So how would we put that in a sentence? Well, we could say what you see, feel, hear, taste, and smell are all based on your perception. What do you think of that? This is not a word, what ya, but let's just pronounce it like it says, what ya. Think of that. Okay? So do you think you could, what do you think your perception would be like if you didn't see, feel, hear, taste, and smell? Your perception would be seriously stunted. In fact, to be able to perceive, we need to be able to use our senses. This makes us more aware. It makes us more observant. So here we can look at this picture and we can have we can perceive the meaning better by looking at these 2 pictures. So for example, his sense of perception is, oh my God, I'm trapped on this island. I see a boat and I'm saved. His sense of perception is, oh my God, I'm trapped on the boat and I want to get to land. Finally, there's land. Okay, so we can all have different senses. We can all have different a different sense of perception depending on our context or what we see. Number 10 is the unconscious or unconscious. And here we don't mean being knocked out, okay? We don't mean really being asleep. We mean it in the sense of the brain or how the mind works. So when something is unconscious, it's done without realizing it. It's involuntary or unintentional. So you might, to use the adverb form, you might do things unconsciously. So for example, one of the things teachers do very automatically without thinking about it is they go into a classroom and they turn the projector on. They don't have to actively think about that. They don't have to turn around and go, oh, what am I doing now? I'm turning the projector on. They don't really need to think about it. They're so used to doing it that it's an unconscious behavior. Think about when you drive. So many things are unintentional, they're automatic. You're able to do them now without thinking about them. When you were learning, that wasn't the case. But now you're able to do them without thinking about them. That's really what the unconscious is. It's when we do things without realizing it, when we do things involuntary or without much intention, unintentionally. Unconscious is all really important when we start thinking about the brain, because there are lots of things that the brain does unconsciously. In fact, we could say, using this word unconscious, psychologists say that the unconscious mind controls more of us than we like to admit. This basically means that a lot of our behavior, like the way we act or conduct ourselves, happens without us really realizing it in an involuntary way or unintentional way. A good example of this is our judgments. We'll often judge things and decide if something is right or wrong. But a lot of psychologists know we do that unconsciously now. Our initial judgment isn't a conscious reaction. In fact, the reasons that we develop for our judgments come after we've already made the judgment. So that would be an example of something that's unconscious, something that happens without us really realizing it. This next word is unique. Unique. Thankfully, you've been introduced to this one already. You should know what unique means. A good go-to definition for unique is one of a kind. So if something is unique, we can describe it as special or one of a kind. So looking over here at this animal, hopefully you've seen this before, maybe you haven't. It's the duck-billed platypus, called duck-billed platypus because it's got the a kind of beak like a duck. And this is the type of animal. And the platypus is absolutely unique. It is an egg-laying, duck-billed, beaver-tailed, otter-footed, try to get the in there, poisonous mammal. So it lays eggs, it's duck-billed, it's got a beaver tail, it's otter-footed, and it's actually poisonous. It's a poisonous mammal. So this makes it completely unique. What other mammals have a beak like a duck? What other mammals lay eggs? Not many mammals lay eggs. This next word is achieve. Achieve is a verb. Before moving on, can you think of a noun of this? Good, achievement. Achievement. What does it mean to achieve something? It means to accomplish or to attain it. So here we see an example of people celebrating. They're all throwing their hats up in the sky. What do you think they achieved? Well, they are graduating. So what they're doing is they're throwing their hats up in the sky to celebrate their graduation. That basically means they finished college. They finished university. So what they accomplished or attained was their degree. They reached the end of their university course. So they achieved their degree. That's what they were working hard to attain. And we could consider their graduation or getting their degree an achievement. How would we put this word in a sentence? You worked hard to get what you have. Be proud of what you achieve in life. In other words, be proud of what you accomplish in life. Keep in mind, you usually achieve things through hard work. Okay, so we have some more words here. We're going to go through these 5 words. from the reading too. The first one is sensory. Sensory. The second one is viable. Viable. Number 3, confronting. Confronting. Number 4, discern. Discern. And number 5, trait. Trait. Okay, so let's break down sensory. What is sensory? Well, sensory is an adjective related to the noun senses. So when we're talking about sensory, we're talking about using the senses. Now, what are the senses? Well, we touched on the senses when we were talking about perception. Remember, to have perception, or when we're talking about perception, we're talking about the way one uses his or her senses. So when we're talking about sensory, we're talking specifically about those senses. So what are the senses? Again, they are hearing, seeing, smell, taste, and touch. So in this picture, we have an example of a man using his, or we have a example of people using a sense here with their hands. What do you think the sense would be? Do you think it's seeing? Do you think it's hearing with the hands? That's good. It's touch. What they're doing here is they are touching, clasping of hands. So how would we use this word sensory in a sentence? Well, we could say, my first time in the souk was unforgettable. The sensory input was wonderful. I remember all the sounds, sights, tastes, and smells. This basically means that the first time going to the souk was a very sensory experience. There were so many things to see. There were so many unique sounds. There were amazing smells, some coming from this stall with food and others coming from that stall with food, some of perfumes. And of course, the tastes as well, the taste of the food from different stalls. So it really was a sensory experience. You were taking in a lot of information through all of your senses. And the person who wrote this really enjoyed it because they said the sensory input was wonderful. Okay, let's move to the next word. The next word is viable. Viable. It's a noun. And it basically means doable or possible. How would we put that in a sentence? We could say, is that plan viable? Are we sure that we'll be able to do it? So that makes sense because we're asking, is that plan doable? Are we sure that we'll be able to do it? Remember, viable means doable or possible. So for example, you could make some plans. You might be working for NASA and you might come up with a viable plan. What's your viable plan? Your viable plan is to send people to the moon. We know this is possible. We know it's doable. Why? Well, we've done it before. It's a doable plan. Are some things doable that we haven't done before? Yes, they are. So right now, for example, we are trying to send people further into space than they've ever gone before. We are trying to send people to Mars. And even though we've never done it before, scientists think this might be a viable plan. They believe that we have the technology, and if we can get people to commit to the long journey of getting to Mars, they believe it could be doable. It could be possible. However, imagine if I was to say, okay, let's go to another galaxy, another star system. Is that a viable plan? No, it's not. It's not doable. It's not possible. We don't have the technology. It would take we, we have we haven't even sent satellites to other solar systems yet. So how would we send people to other solar systems yet? So that's not viable. It's not doable. Let's move to the next word. Here we've got the word confronting. Confronting. Confronting is a verb, but it also can be used as a noun, commonly as a gerund when it's being used as a noun. So what does confronting mean? To confront. If you are confronting someone, if you confront someone, it means you are challenging them. So when you're confronting somebody, they might do something that you don't like, and you might challenge them about it. That might cause a confrontation. Confrontation is another noun for the verb confront. Now, it mentions here that confronting can be used as a gerund, so as a noun. How does that work? Well, we could say Ali's father insisted that his son should go to the desert with him every Wednesday. Ali was failing the PYD and wanted to study. Confronting his father was very hard. So why that makes sense is because here we have a bit of a disagreement. Ali wants his son to go, or Ali's father wants his son to go with him to the desert every Wednesday. Ali, alternatively, wants to study because he's failing the PYD. So he is going to have to challenge what his father wants. He is going to have to approach his father and say, "Listen, Dad, I want to study." This will probably create a confrontation. So challenging his father would be very hard. Challenging his father would be very hard. In other words, confronting his father would be very hard. This next word is discern. Discern. Okay? Discern is a verb. It basically means to figure something out, um, also to differentiate. Just remember it as to figure something out. So, what things do we need to figure out? Well, one thing we need to figure out is the truth. We all live in an age where we get lots of supposed facts from online. We're given this information and that information, and we have to decide what's true and what's not true. So, one thing that you will need to be able to discern is the truth. So, we could say something like this: the ability to discern the truth from lies is a wonderful skill to have. One more time, the ability to discern truth from lies is a wonderful skill to have. That basically means the ability to be able to figure out what is true and what is lies. And that's a wonderful ability to have. So you need to differentiate what is true and what is lies. And that's what it means to discern, to figure out or differentiate. This word is a trait. Trait. It is a noun. It is a noun. So what does that mean? Well, a trait is a characteristic or feature. So if everybody in Ireland had red hair, that would be a trait. Okay? That would be a characteristic or feature of Irish people. Looking at this picture here, we could say these girls all have different traits. Traits. Their hair, eye, and skin color are all so beautifully and wonderfully different. And that's true. Yep, they all have different traits. Here we've got a redhead, black hair, Here we've got blonde hair, so their hair color is different. We've got different color eyes. Some people have blue eyes. Some people have brown eyes, and their skin color is different. They, um, as it goes from left to right, you can see they go from whiter skin to darker skin, and it's good. It's true that they all have different traits because they all have different characteristics or features. So yeah, common traits would be hair color or eye color or skin color. And it's great to see. I totally agree. They're all so beautifully and wonderfully different. Okay, let's move on to the next set of words. This is for listening one, and we're going to quickly go through the pronunciation of these 11 words. So number one, give the floor. Number two, off the top of your head. Off the top of your head. Number three, transfer. Transfer. Number four, context. Context. Number five, to not get. To not get. Number six, spontaneous. Spontaneous. Number seven, intriguing. Intriguing. Number eight, wrote. Wrote. Number nine, figure out. Figure out. Number 10, socialized. Socialized. And number 11, end up. End up. Okay, let's go through this first one. To give the floor. What does give the floor mean? I give the floor to Ali. And then I kind of shut up and I let Ali speak. What does that mean? Well, if you give the floor to somebody, you're letting them speak or you're letting them show something. You're basically passing the attention from you to them. It's commonly used when if you're doing some sort of presentation or making a speech, and then you want someone else to speak. So they have their, let's say you have your part to say, and then they have their part to say. You say your part first, and then you give the floor to someone else. So it's their turn to speak now. So how would we use that in a context? We could say, Ahmed, we have heard your opinion. It's time we gave Ali the floor. So that's a good example. So in class, you could be asking a question and two hands could go up and maybe Ahmed's hand goes up first and Ahmed shares his opinion and Ahmed maybe goes on speaking for too long and Ahmed keeps sharing his opinion. So the teacher might politely interrupt and say, Ahmed, we have heard your opinion. Thank you for giving it. It's time we gave Ali the floor. So now it's basically time for Ali to speak. It's his turn. Ali, who's been waiting patiently with his hand up too. So we're giving him the floor. So here in this example, who do you think has the floor has been given to? It's being given to this man here. You can see that these two men are not speaking. So they have gave the floor to him. Gave the floor to him. If you didn't give the floor to somebody, what do you think would happen? Well, two things would happen. Either one person would just keep on speaking and nobody else would get a chance to speak, or people would just speak over each other. So to keep things nice and polite, if we're speaking in groups, it's good to give the floor to other speakers. Okay, we've also got this one off the top of your head. Off the off the top. Sorry, I read that wrong. It was like off with your head. No, off the top of your head is a prepositional phrase, and it basically means that whatever comes to you kind of in an unplanned way. unplanned way. So if something's off the top of your head, it's spoken without thought or planning beforehand. So if somebody asks you like what you're doing on Wednesday and you haven't really thought about it, you might just say, I don't know, but off the top of my head, I wouldn't mind going swimming. You're kind of coming up with it on the spot. You haven't really thought about it beforehand. So that's kind of what off the top of your head means. You never use off the top of your head when you've actually really, really thought about something. If you've been thinking about something for a long time, you wouldn't use this off the top of your head prepositional phrase. But if somebody asks you a question and you don't think too much about what you're saying, or your answer hasn't involved really any planning beforehand, then you would use off the top of your head. So let's see how that would be used in a sentence. Well, we could say, what are your plans for the weekend, Nora? I've no plans now, but off the top of my head, I'm thinking I'll go shopping in Ote Mall. Okay? So remember, off the top of your head is unplanned. So it's basically the opposite of this image. This man here is thinking about this big, big plan. You can see how everything is linked together and it's connected. If something is off the top of your head, it is unplanned. So if the man was mentioning something off the top of his head, he wouldn't have a big plan like this. There would be nothing there. Okay, so hopefully this one is a fairly common word. It seems to be one we use a lot because it's often connected with money. Transfer. Transfer is a verb. It means moving something from one place to another. That's it. So one thing we commonly transfer is money from our bank account. So if we need to pay a bill, we'll transfer our money into someone else's account, for example. So we're transferring money. Or if you have a current account and a savings account, you might transfer money from your savings to your current account if you need to use your savings. And another example of things that would be transferred, football players. So football players move from one team to another team, and we call that a football transfer. Transfer can be used in lots of different ways. It could be used to move these boxes, let's say. So if I'm moving these boxes from one room to another room, I'm transferring the boxes from one place to another place. Another example would be, could you please transfer these computer files from my old computer to my new computer? Thank you. So why does that make sense? Well, because you want to keep your files, but you don't want them on your old computer. So you need to move them to your new computer. And remember to do that, you would transfer from your old computer to your new computer. Okay, this next word is context. Context. And context is a noun. It basically means the situation, events, or information related to something. Or in other words, the setting. The setting. So, looking at this sentence here, we could say it is important to put events in their proper historical context. Okay, so how would we explain that using a better example? Well, maybe we have this event here. This event would be people, say, doing a protest for freedom, basically. So maybe they feel that some civil rights have been hurt in America. So they've got this sign up here saying freedom is essential. So this word is important. This word to be free, freedom. So maybe that's the event, the protest or the fight for freedom. So this current event, which is happening, let's say in the United States of America, we need to put this in its proper historical context. What does that mean? Well, how long have people been fighting for freedom? What does it mean to fight for freedom? What does this mean in terms of history? Has it been traditionally one group against another group. How have we fought for freedom before in the past? What freedoms have we already got today? Does it make sense to be still fighting for freedom now? Did freedom in the past mean something different than it does today? So to put something in its historical context, you're really putting it in its historical setting. And that way you would be able to understand more about what the current event really means. Another way of using context is looking at, for example, when we're explaining a sentence like this, it is important to put events in their proper historical context. We could say, hey, this is a gap fill. This is a gap fill. Now, what type of word goes here? What type of word goes here? And notice how you have to look at the other words around to understand what word goes here. In other words, you need to look at the whole context of the sentence, basically the whole setting of the sentence to understand what word goes here. Okay, to not get something, to not get something. What does it mean to not get? Well, to not get something is to really not understand, to not understand. So here you could say, hmm, I tried to, ooh, wow, what's wrong here? I tried to help my grandfather, but he doesn't get new technology at all. Okay, yeah, so I tried to help with a small m, my grandfather, but he doesn't get new technology at all. He doesn't get new technology at all. So when we're saying he doesn't get new technology at all, we mean he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand it. So when you don't get something, you don't understand it. You don't understand it. So think of things that you might not get. Think of things that you might not get. Are there things that you don't understand? Okay, let's move on. Okay, so this word is spontaneous. Spontaneous. Spontaneous is an adjective. It basically means not planned. Okay, so if you do something that you didn't really plan on doing, it's spontaneous. So here we have the wedding photo, for example. These people are are posing, let's say, on this quay next to this body of water for a wedding photo. And all of a sudden, the groom decides to grab hold of his wife and dive into the water. He didn't think that he would do this. He didn't think about it at all. He just decided to do it on the spot. So it's a spontaneous action. It wasn't expected or it wasn't planned for. How would we put this in a sentence? Ahmed, you're so boring. Don't you ever want to do something crazy? Like just go for a spontaneous road trip? Come on, it'll be fun. You don't have to go home this weekend. We can tell your parents. So what makes this action spontaneous? It makes it spontaneous because it's not really planned. The road trip here is not planned. It's sort of crazy because you wouldn't be planning for it. It's just one of those things like, oh, let's do it. Let's just do it now. So remember, if you're planning for something, it's not spontaneous. So if you decided, oh, I'm going to go to Jeddah this summer, I'm going to book my hotel today, I'm going to plan everything I'm going to go to. I'm going to make sure that all of my arrangements are out of the way. This is not a spontaneous action. But if you decide, I'm going to Jeddah in the afternoon, I don't have a place to stay yet, but I'll figure it out on the way, that's a spontaneous action. You didn't plan it. You didn't really think about it. You're just going to do it anyway. Okay, so the next word is intriguing. Intriguing. And intriguing is an adjective. It means interesting because it's unusual or unexpected. So, putting this in a sentence, you could say Jamie Dornan is such an intriguing actor. He's so mysterious. So, if there's a sense of mystery about somebody, we might find them intriguing. We might find them intriguing if there's a sense of mystery around them. Why would you find them intriguing? Because they're sort of unusual. They don't act like expected people. There's a sense of mystery around them. So looking at this image over here of this actor, what is intriguing about him? Well, who is he? You know, this is not the way people usually appear. Is what's his face look like? What is his face? Is he human? What's going on? You know, this is an intriguing image. It makes us kind of ask questions about it and go, wow, this is so mysterious. And that's what makes it intriguing. We don't really expect to see things like this, so we find things like this intriguing. So if you're, by the way, if you think somebody is mysterious, you can describe them as intriguing. You could say that, well, wow, they're an intriguing person. They're so mysterious. So this next word is rote. It can be an adjective or a noun. It's actually more common to meet it as a noun, but we'll go over how it can be used as both. So what is rote? Well, rote is to learn something kind of in a tedious, boring way. So for example, if I'm going to learn a poem by rote, I might continuously say it over and over and over again. If we're going to teach you by rote, for example, if we're going to teach you by rote the vocabulary, we're going to maybe go through the words in the first 10 minutes and then go through them again and go through them again and go through them again. So one common thing we learn in by rote is the multiplication tables. So 2 by 2 is 4. 2 by 3 is 6. 2 by 4 is 8. When we're all children, we all kind of practice the multiplication tables like that. So we learn by rote. In fact, a lot of children get taught by rote. So using this in an example, it could be, how did you learn your multiplication tables? You could say, I learned them through rote memorization. That would be using rote as an adjective. Basically, it means using a kind of rote memory. So that memory of just kind of doing it over and over and over and over again in a very kind of mechanical and procedural way. You could also describe it as rote learning. Rote learning, if you wanted to change that noun. That's kind of using the learning technique that uses rote. Using as a noun, you could say, I learned them through, or I learned them by rote. I learned them by rote. So make sure that if you're using it as a noun, put, especially in the middle of a sentence, put by before it, because it often goes before it. Okay, this next word is figure out. Figure out. What does figure out mean? Well, figure out means to understand something. So something you might figure out, for example, would be a maths equation. So you don't quite know what the answer is straight away, but then you kind of think about it, you solve the puzzle. In other words, you figure it out. You suddenly understand it. You figured it out. Okay, so how would we put this in a sentence? We could say, my sister Fada is so smart. She always figures out everything so quickly. Notice how I put she always figures out everything so quickly. I put figures because it's a she. So she always figures everything out so quickly. In other words, she always understands things. Things are not problems to her like they are to other people. If they are problems, they're problems for a very short period of time. because she figures them out. She understands them. This next word is socialize. Socialize. Try and think about what socialize means. Socialize is really to meet together. So who do we socialize with? We socialize with other people, usually our friends. Okay. So here we've got an example question. Why do you socialize with Hamad? Why do you socialize with Hamad? He's a bad person. I hate him. So in other words, this is basically asking you, why do you hang out with Hamad? Why do you meet up with Hamad? He's a bad person. I hate him. Okay. So this one's very useful because it's a verb. So remember, this is used as a verb. If you socialize with people, what are you like? You are probably considered social. So if you socialize with lots of people, you are a social person. You are a social person. Can you socialize on your own? No, you can't. You need to be able to meet people, so you can't socialize on your own. Can you only socialize with your friends, or can you socialize with other people? Nope, you can socialize with other people. You don't just need to socialize with your friends. In fact, you can socialize with strangers. So if you meet up with strangers and you talk with them, you are socializing with them. So yeah, that's a good one to keep in mind. Okay, so here we have end up. End up. End up is a verb, so it can be one of its verb forms could be in the simple past, for example. So ended up. That works just as fine. It's a verb. What does it mean? What does it mean to end up? Well, when we end up, it kind of means finishing by something. So I ended up winning the race. In the end, I won the race. Basically, what we mean there by using end up. So how would we use this in a sentence? I want to fly back to the US this summer. I hope that everything will end up well. So I hope that everything will end up well. That just basically means that in the end, I hope everything will be well. So what do we think about end up? Do we use it at the start, the middle, or at the end? We kind of use it at the end. When we use end up, it refers to the end of an event. Okay, two things that are worth considering this week is the difference between end up versus turn out. End up versus turn out. They are often considered similar, but they are technically different. So remember, end up is the finish. The focus is on the end. So let's look at the example of a runner crossing the finish line. So an example sentence here could be, in the end, I ended up winning the race. In the end, I ended up winning the race. So this is a good example because here the focus is very much on the end. What happened at the end? Well, somebody won the race. And that makes sense because what happens at the end of the race? Somebody wins it. Okay? So here, I ended up winning the race explains what happened. What happened at the end of whatever event it would be it the race or maybe the whole idea of training and getting ready for the race. Now let's move on to turn out. Think of turn out as showing something unexpected. Now, importantly, it doesn't need to be at the end. So, for example, if we're talking about the runner, we could say, it turned out I was a very fast runner. Now, if we're using this expression, it turned out I was a very fast runner, do you think this person, here represented as I, expected to be a very fast runner? No, they weren't expecting it because we really show turn out to show something kind of unexpected. So if we're saying it turned out I was a very fast runner, they weren't expecting to be a very fast runner. It just happened that they were. So they were kind of surprised by this. So you could say, surprisingly, it turned out I was a very fast runner. And that would make perfect sense. It turned out I was a very fast runner. In the end, I ended up winning the race. Okay, so putting them together, look at this last example. Here we've got a gap fill. So can you figure out which of these verbs to put in each gap? Surprisingly, I something something to be very good at studying. So I something something acing the test. Keep in mind that ed is just to talk about the past because each of these verbs here are being used in the past. Pause the video and see if you can get that one correct. Okay, so the correct answer here would be surprisingly, I turned out to be very good at studying. So I ended up acing the test. Okay, that makes sense because here the person is saying they are surprised. Something is happening that they weren't expecting. And I turned out to be very good at studying. What were they not expecting to happen? They weren't expecting to be very good at studying. They were expecting to be either average or bad at studying. But it just turned out unexpectedly that they were very good at studying. So in other words, this was unexpected. That's why we're using that turned out. And as a result of being very good at studying, what happened at the end? Well, so I ended up acing the test. Notice here, ended up is really just saying another way of saying kind of in the end. The focus is very much on the finish or the end. So I ended up acing the test. Okay, well done for making it through this second video of the Book 6 Unit 4 vocabulary. It was a fairly basic video. Make sure that you practice all of this vocabulary in your own time. If you're not sure still about what some of these words mean or how to use them, make sure that you interact with your teacher and that they know this and that you mention the words that you are unsure about to them. They might be able to explain it in a different way, which will help you understand. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day or night, whatever time it is there. Okay, goodbye.